Glad the Arcanum's still not depraved enough to spy on people on the bog.
Ah, we got one on the bog.
Hey guys, it's me, back at it again.
Sickening.
Oi, just for that, Marcus, you're gonna face the wrath of my
folding chair.
So Chapter 5 was finally released after tormenting us with the cliffhanger of all cliffhangers for the better part of a year. We finally have our answers now. And...
sweet relief.
Indeed, I'm with you there, Grimal. Alright, so this is something of a follow-up to my original theory video, which you should totally watch before this one if you haven't. Please, you'll understand why in a minute. But also, this is essential. Watch Hunt the Parenting Chapter 5 if you haven't. I'm going to be spoiling it into utter oblivion, so go and watch the theory video first, then the actual episode. I'm considering this a direct continuation of the theory video, so a lot of stuff might not make sense if you're not watching that first. You have 5 seconds to avoid ruining it for yourself. 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, so... I am the Foresight God, and all shall kneel before my psychic/reality warping powers. Praise me. I have been riding an absolute high ever since that episode came out, let me tell you. I absolutely nailed it. Well, one part of it at the very least, I beyond question called. I nailed that Matilda was a werewolf. I'd say it was obvious in hindsight, but like, I called it, so to me it was obvious in foresight too. She spelled her own name wrong, for God's sake. She spelled it... What even was it? Matilda? Alas, my victory does come with downsides. You know Matilda was on R34? I learned this by browsing the Hunt the Parenting subreddit. I'm gonna regret this. I know I'm gonna regret this. I know for a fact... Yep, that went exactly as I expected it to. This is what happens when you let people dommy-mommy online. Magnus, could you handle this one for me? Thank you, beloved demon spawn. But no, in all seriousness, although I was right on this one, I was second-guessing myself up until the last second. That episode was a series of twists and turns, but that reveal was such a glorious moment of vindication. Damn, I'm good. Oh, I must admit, I do find it funny that in my original theory I had a section where I said, basically under the human form, wolf form, and wolf form matter, who cares? And then they used the wolfman homid form thing between humans and wolf form, and it was central to maintaining the mystery until the last possible second. That'll fucking teach me to prejudge. There's a small detail that I liked with Occam and Waters and Kitten in particular that I just wanted to bring attention to. I like how Occam referred to Kitten's return as being fanfare, and Waters tells him to stop being so modest. It implies, without directly stating it, that Kitten was well liked and probably a top member in terms of accomplishment during his time in the Arcanum, so it fit amazingly well when Occam mentioned wanting to have Kitten back in the Arcanum. It's just such a small thing, I know, and such an odd scene to focus on, but I love small moments like this. It shows how Kitten isn't just a naive learner that we think of him as, but a curious mind who does have knowledge, he just craves more. I know I'm the one who keeps calling for a distinction between HTP and TTS, but after watching Kitten being treated like crap in TTS for so long, it's just nice to see him being treated with genuine respect. It just makes me smile, I love it. The episode, as a whole, is amazing. I have to say, animation quality, shot through the roof. Character, dialogue, voice acting, absolutely spot on. There's not an inch of fat on it, despite it having the slower and calmer moments that it needed to have. But it was all used amazingly to set up new world-building details and character moments. It did humour, exposition, character development, and establishment, and mystery all at the same time. I guarantee you, from what I know about writing, they went through at least 20 drafts of that script. Bare minimum, almost certainly more. That thing was gone over with a fine comb. Speaking of voice acting, we've got to give props to Speaker D. Everyone else did an amazing job. Please don't interpret this as a jab at everyone else's work. Thunderpsyker as Kitten, Sniper's Matilda, Honky Crow as Giles, and Archaeotech as Remold also did utterly phenomenal jobs this time around. And we all know I adore Grimal, and a lot of that is down to Odoroshi for doing her so well. But Speaker D... Out! Everyone out! Good lord. He does an amazing job at the best of times, from game mastering the Norfolk Wizard game, which you should also be watching because it's canon to HTP and also its mages, which are the best and it's phenomenal. And Speaker also does a great job with D normally.
Oh, what a beautiful morning to— Who the fuck is in my kitchen?
But this episode, he absolutely nailed it. They've been building up to this one for a long time, I can tell. The sheer primal terror on Dee's face when it became clear that it was a werewolf. Perfection. And that only worked as well as it did for two main reasons. First, in just how well it was executed, but second, in how it contrasted it is with his usual bombastic self, and in this particular case, sheer arrogance shown in the previous episodes. If there wasn't a backlog of Dee acting this way beforehand and basically being right all the time, only to be contrasted here, this moment wouldn't have hit as hard as it did. So props on that. Speaking of arrogance though, I've defended Dee in that I don't exactly think he made a mistake when it came to dealing with Guy in the police station. But here, yeah, no, Dee completely screwed up here, and how well it contrasts with his normal self, it absolutely helped to establish the sheer threat of the werewolf before it even started doing things. And then it started doing things. Mother of Christ. This episode has set the bar for anything World of Darkness, especially the werewolves. Despite the fact that they are unfathomably powerful, they've kind of gotten a bit of a raw deal in how they're portrayed in media. Like the Earthblood game, where they're kind of just hanging out and can take maybe 3 or 4 shots to the face when that is a laughably small amount of bullets needed to drop a Garou, silver-tipped or not. Episode 5. This is how the warriors of Gaia act. You can really tell that the episode was made by people who gave a damn, sat down with one another and said, okay, we are going to do the werewolves justice come hell or high water. So please, let me be the one to speak on behalf of the World of Darkness fanbase. You absolutely nailed it, Ogre Papanong. Just round of applause. Round of applause. The way this series is made honestly tempts me to just make a full-blown follow-along series of it, just dissecting and breaking down all the creative ways it's made and how it all builds into itself. Something about how it's made just fascinates me on a fundamental level. It's just, I cannot stress how good it is. I want as many people to see it as possible, because this is the level of quality media should be striving towards at all times. But there's a lot of people with a lot of questions. I did a poll and yeah. See, Americans, this is what an overwhelming mandate looks like. So I'll go over some of the stuff that needs explaining and I'll try to explain it as best I can. This is going to be another one of those unlist later type videos, so we're just going to ramble a bit, not more of a stream of conscious type stuff, you know the drill. I'll get sources from where I can, I'll disclose if I'm taking it from somewhere else, but some of these are my thoughts and some of them I'm debunking theories I think are dumb. If you've seen the first video, you know what we're doing. Alrighty, first let's tackle some theories real quick. The ghoul in the chapter house, first of all. We'll be on this one for a bit since I have the most to say about it. We still don't actually know who the ghoul is, and I'm pretty sure there is still a ghoul in the chapter house. Because it seems to me to be incredibly unlikely that the vampires knew about werewolf infiltration or that they're coordinating with the Garou. Werewolves and vampires despise one another and will attack almost on sheer instinct. They rarely, if ever, communicate with one another. And that's usually on the part of the werewolves. Werewolves view vampires as being tainted by the spirit of entropy, the worm which their entire conflict revolves around defeating. Vampires are more than likely more open to having some werewolves to call upon if the option was open to them, since vampires are more about political power plays, but the werewolves sure as hell aren't going to be doing that unless they have literally no other choice. This goes so deep that the werewolves literally don't understand anything about vampires. They think the more deformed a vampire is, the older and therefore more powerful they are, which is all a matter of not how this works. Vampire power is based on how low their generation is. This essentially means in practice they give Nosferatu vampires of a high generation a wide berth, but they'll pick fights with Giovanni and Toreador of low generations quite readily, to their own peril. Of course there are exceptions. In World of Darkness, there are always exceptions to any one rule or generalization. I mean, there's one character sheet of a person who is a werewolf vampire. That is not supposed to be a thing, but here it is. That's just the sort of universe World of Darkness is. Any rule, generalized or specific, there are exceptions to it. So it's not impossible that an alliance between the werewolves and vampires is in place, just improbable. There's only a couple of tribes that would ever even consider such a thing, and they would be seen as tainted by the other tribes. Ghoul werewolves aren't unheard of, but they are absurdly rare to the point of being non-existent. We're talking like maybe 3 cases cited in the source books. To most werewolves, vampire blood consumed in the way needed to become a ghoul would trigger an allergic reaction, if not just outright poison them. And Matilda, or whatever her name is, sure didn't act like a ghoul. She had her wits about her, so I personally think that we can rule out that possibility. To be totally honest, we're less theorizing and more speculating on that at this stage. So I think it wise to focus on the stuff we're able to actually verify instead. So who is the ghoul? I'm still putting my money on Grimal, just less of it. And by less of it I mean if I was betting £100 that it was her before, I might make it £90 now. Because I'm still pretty damn sure it's her, I'm just lowering it because there's a bit more room for doubt in my mind. So why do I still think it's her? I'll tell you why I'm not convinced it's her first of all. The theory that says, if you look at her during this sequence, you can see her nails are breaking the tiles. That requires the superhuman strength a ghoul can provide. The reason that doesn't convince me is because it's Grimal. Grimal's used to tell a lot of anime-esque jokes that are done in an anime-esque style, and this is a very anime-esque joke. I'm not entirely convinced that we should use that as info on anything. It's also like a spirit flying out of her mouth after that was done, which is another thing done in anime. I don't see anyone taking that to mean anything. If we did, then the most likely answer would be a wraith, and I'm not going into the idea of her being a wraith. That would make me sad. There's also part of why I'm disregarding the idea that Grimal is the ghoul because she got whacked by Matilda when she was in werewolf form and survived it, because I think Werewolf Lady was holding back, but let's leave that particular bombshell for a little bit later, shall we? Then again, this episode has single-handedly proven that all my bullshit observations were 100% worth taking seriously, so maybe I'm shooting myself in the foot with not taking that as evidence. But that being said, I like my evidence to be a bit more concrete than that. So here's the evidence that I think suggests it. The delirium. Just to recap, in case you've forgotten or didn't quite understand it the first time around, the delirium is the supernatural panic humans feel when they see a werewolf transform or when they're in their war form. You get 3 options: fight, flight, or freeze. And what you do is entirely dependent on your willpower and character. There's not really much of a choice either. Brock running up to smack the werewolf with his
folding chair
isn't even necessarily a conscious decision he's making. He's under delirium's effects. He's just doing stuff. If you're impacted by delirium, you need to be well versed in what you're dealing with, have immense willpower, or be trained enough to keep your wits about you, which Brock does not have. That's why Remold having the presence of mind to destroy the hunter data instead of just unloading into Matilda is significant. He held his own far better than most would. The exception to the delirium's effects are the supernaturally touched. So, changelings, vampires, demons, and other Garu, even some hunters who are experienced enough to know what they're dealing with, such as the imbued, all of these are considered supernaturally touched. And by experienced, I don't mean that they're like aware that it exists or have even encountered it a few times. I mean like has had a fight with them, been impacted by it directly in some way, maybe took a vampiric discipline or 2 to the face, maybe has some latent psychic powers, which are just a thing that exists in World of Darkness I'm telling you about. There are telekinetics that aren't affiliated with anything and are just a part of World of Darkness. Let us not dwell on this fact for a moment longer. Being supernaturally touched is not super clearly defined. It doesn't always inherently mean that they are supernatural themselves, which does throw a bit of a spanner into the works. If you recall, Grimal knew about the supernatural before she met Kitten, so for all we know, that has something to do with my theory rather than her being the ghoul. But it's all we've got to work with, so work with it we shall. Nothing's ever simple with these people, is it? In Home to the Parenting, the delirium is conveyed visually via the eyes, white pupils, and a black swirling pattern. This is first shown with spit very clearly. As in, the damned episode starts with a zoom in on the eye. In the last episode it opened up with a shot of Dee being shadowed by the full moon, and the moon is linked to werewolves, which turned out to be the central group focused on in these last couple of episodes. I feel like that's being done to call attention to it for a reason. This visual is shown even in those who are able to fire through the delirium, like Remold. Looky here, see? There it is. It doesn't matter how impacted you are by it, or how your reaction manifests in panic, fight, or flight. If you're impacted by it, you get the white pupil swirly eyes. We even get a glimpse of it within Dr. Waters. So the theory that she's the ghoul can be put to rest. Happy to be the person to debunk all the people claiming that she was the ghoul. You're welcome, fanbase. Happy to be of service. We get a close-up of Grimal after she's been whacked onto the floor. Before Matilda pins her down, there's no sign of it. Afterwards, it's closer, I guess? But it's not even close to what Giles, Remold, and Spit had. I've seen some people say that this is the delirium. And it's closer in the sense that it's not just someone's eye being clearly shown, but other than that, it's got no similarities to the delirium at all. The delirium so far has been very clearly visually displayed, or it's been undercut with subtitles like it was with Brock and Giles. If it's meant to showcase delirium, then I would argue that this is the first instance of there being actually genuinely poorly communicated artwork in this entire series. And that feels like a pretty big moment to make such a mistake in, and for no one to notice it in nearly a full year of production. It's not like an audio cue where different systems might have different settings that pick up different things that no one noticed. You're looking at this, and someone physically put pen to paper or tablet, whatever, and drew this, and all the other examples. If this is meant to be delirium, then I think it's poorly communicated. When Grimal attacks Matilda, if we zoom in on her eyes, they look odd. I've seen some people say that this is delirium, which... maybe? I don't think so, though. Why would this be different to the one we saw of her on the floor? Why change it up? I think that it might just be an action movement, but I'm honestly not sure. I don't think it's delirium, and if that's not enough of a visual cue for you, I've got a new one. When Giles was under the delirium, we saw Matilda from his perspective, and he had this shadowy outline around the edge of the screen and these red, bloodshot veins in the corners of his vision. Now, this could also be due to the damage he suffered. He's got this thing sticking out of his torso. I'm not entirely sure what it is or how it even got there, but it's there. When Grimal gets whacked, she's coughing up blood, gets thrown across a room, maybe through a wall. Whatever happened, planks of wood are being knocked up off the floor. And then Matilda is putting her weight on Grimal's chest. We then see Matilda from Grimal's perspective, and those red lines and black shadowy outline aren't there. Why does one injured person have them, but the other injured person doesn't? My guess? In Giles, it's meant to convey delirium. The lack of it in Grimal implies it's absent from her. And then, when Dee is fighting Matilda and Grimal is crawling away, no sign of delirium at all. In the case of Brock in particular, when his eyes weren't quite so clearly displayed, although I think there might be like 1 pixel of white in his pupils if you look close, I honestly can't tell. But again, in cases where it is harder to tell, the subtitles come in clutch to make sure that it's understood that it's supposed to be, quote, delirious laughter. Delirious, delirium, I feel like the connection there is supposed to be quite clear. I feel like if Grimal was meant to be under the delirium, she would have a subtitle like Brock had. Like, delirious war cry or something. I feel like that's a lot of major visual oversights back to back for no one to notice in production. These are the people that put blood over the mouth of a wolf as a form of foreshadowing, subtle claw marks everywhere, had Matilda misspell her own name, displayed the vent in the background of Chapter 4 which became relevant in Chapter 5 that some of you doubted me on. Don't think I didn't see you, heathens.
Maybe.
Never question me again. I wonder if my exaggerated self-congratulatory jokes are making me come across as an asshole. I mean, I'm not going to stop, but still. Anyway, my point being that these guys put in a frankly psychopathic level of detail into this series visually. I feel if they were going to screw up anyway, it wouldn't be on something this obvious. Besides, throwing herself at bigger opponents than herself is something we saw Grimal do in the pub audio log. I mean, granted, dealing with pricks in a pub is a whole other ballgame to dealing with a werewolf. But it shows a consistency to her character. She's willing to throw herself into fights that she's outmatched in. I kind of think that she's just like this and that the delirium has nothing to do with it. Just another reason why I adore this gremlin weeb. I really hope she isn't a traitor. I feel so bad for her. Give her a boyfriend, a girlfriend, an envy partner, a pet dog. Just give her some love, please. I feel like I should specify that the pet dog is not meant to be a romantic, which is a thing I'd have to do now. I do hate the internet sometimes. I just don't understand why they would use 2 different squiggly eye designs for Grimal. And the second one can't be delirium, because if it is, you know who else would be under the effects of the delirium? Matilda herself. Then why have this one when Grimal is attacking? I'm looking in my guess. I think the swirl pattern is either a mistake, they didn't expect someone to be idiotic enough to zoom in like that and it's supposed to just be an action line, or it's something that's going to be explained as something else. I do not think it's delirium. That's my guess. The exact specifics are now what are up for debate. Was she under mind controlled while also being a ghoul? How did Matilda do anything while Grimal was there? If Grimal was under mind control, why was this removed from her memory? Did Grimal just leave once Matilda showed up? Why didn't she mention that then? Or is Grimal just very good at lying? At that point, we're talking about motivation, and I can't assess that because while I'm psychic, I'm not telepathic. I don't know what's going on in that head of hers, and nothing she's said in any of her appearances could be enough to get a concrete motivation out of. I could guess that she wants to get information on the Quagian based on her dialogue in the audio log in the pub, but that really is nothing more than a guess. There's enough to speculate on, but not enough to really make a theory out of. And there is also evidence that would suggest that Grimal isn't the ghoul, to be clear. For example, the fact that she was in the security room and the footage was tampered with, but there was still footage of her on it. And that seems like quite the oversight on her end if it was her and that was her also messing with the security footage. I feel like we're missing something. One piece of crucial information that would let us blow this case wide open, but we don't have it yet. Or at the very least, I haven't been able to spot it yet. There is also Elise. She came out of this looking mighty damn suspect as well. From her giving Grimal a hairband to hide her burn to stealing the keys to let Grimal get in the security room in the first place. She's either involved directly, or she has one hell of a bad case of being in the wrong place at the wrong time and doing the wrong thing at that time, because she's looking mighty sus right about now.
Actually, bear with me a second.
I've seen some people speculate that she might be a changeling, specifically a slough.
I suppose I should explain changelings a bit, but I'm not going to go super in-depth with them. To put it simply, they're humans that have fairy souls in them, due to the Fae being cut off from their home dimension and needing hosts to survive. They appear to be human to any other human, but other changelings can see them as any number of supernatural creatures, including Slender Man. Nope, that's not a joke, that's literally written in the books, that's a thing that can happen. A slough is a type of changeling. They feed on glamour, raw creativity, basically. But here's why I'm not going too in-depth with them, and it has to do with Elise being a changeling.
I find this to be a dubious prospect at best, for a couple of reasons. One being that if she is a slough, then the Arcanum Chapter House has the most hilariously inept security protections in place I've ever seen. There's a ghoul, there's a werewolf, and now there's a changeling. All we need now is a wraith, a mummy, and someone possessed by a demon, and we've got the whole bloody World of Darkness lineup here. And we might even have one of them in there as well. The second reason being that the slough specifically can never talk in anything louder than a quiet whisper.
Is he a manimal type vampire?
Now that's a mighty loud, quiet whisper, innit? Also, on that note, so I'm not totally sure what Elise is doing, truth be told. I think that there's intentionally something being held back from us. The order of events, what precisely happened during those more ambiguous moments, the exact order of the events. Something that once we have it all in place, it's just going to click, and we'll be able to put this whole thing together. For all we know, Grimal did the ghoul thing, crawled back into the security room, Matilda came in, Grimal left, and then Elise gave Grimal a hairband to cover up her burn. Or maybe Grimal ghoul dominated Elise after the fact. Grimal did seem to want to defend Elise a lot, and while that could just out of be genuine concern from her friend, the part of me that thinks that she's the ghoul suspects that Grimal dominated Elise more out of necessity than malice, and didn't think that she'd be caught up like this and never intended for that to happen. So she's trying to protect her friend after putting her in an incredibly compromising position accidentally.
Or maybe Matilda lied about running into Grimal in the security room just outright and she was just trying to sow dissent. It's also equally possible that whoever the ghoul's dominator is using their discipline to a distance, which is something that they can do. Subliminal messaging, or even in real time screwing around with them. Now, they mentioned Obfuscate in that one audio log about the vampiric disciplines. Maybe the vampire is in the building, just watching them. My head hurts. This is the downside to knowing as much about World of Darkness as I do and doing theories like this. There's like 15 different possible options here. This fly could be the ghoul for all I know. Yes, that is entirely possible. Remember Kitten and Dee's new pet hounds? That's a thing that can happen.
This team makes you second guess everything. And if you look into World of Darkness deeply enough, you'll find archetypes of supernatural creatures with basically every human on the planet. Especially when it comes to changelings. Like, one could make the argument that because he's a workout fitness guy that doesn't instantly jump towards violence, that Harry is a troll, or perhaps even a particular type of mummy that focuses on people that didn't take care of their bodies. This goes so far that if you were to place some random Muslim character into the series, apropos of nothing, that alone would be a strong argument to make that they're an Eshu changeling, due to the correlation of many Eshu being of Middle Eastern and African origins, and Islam being a prominent religion in those areas. Basically every personality type or group that you could imagine has some correlation to some supernatural phenomenon. So I find that relying on those aspects as evidence for a character being supernatural to be a dubious prospect. And also reeks of racial profiling just a bit. Look, I'll be blunt. For all we know, Elise could just be autistic. I've known autistic people that act like that. That is fully a possibility. I'm not saying it's bad evidence. It's just that for me to be comfortable with making that sort of assertion, I need more than that to work with. Multiple things came into play with Matilda and Grimal that made me comfortable making the jump that they were a Garou and a ghoul respectively. It wasn't just one thing, it was a bunch of different things. I could be shooting myself in the foot by not using this as absolute evidence, but not relying on those sort of assumptions served me well the first time, so I'm not fixing what isn't broke. I think what's being done here is that a bunch of different leads, which could go nowhere but also could go somewhere, are being laid intentionally to make the actual plotline harder to predict. Like, okay, does anyone know about the SCP wiki? Basic premise is that there's a bunch of different anomalous objects and creatures all over the world that are contained and categorized by the SCP Foundation in that universe. Thousands of them. You also have SCP-001, and there are dozens of different entries for SCP-001. When Day Breaks, the Scarlet King, the Factory, the Spiral Path, etc, etc. Some are outright fake SCPs that don't exist. Some do. Some used to exist but are now defunct. But all of them are also real at the same time. And the reason that this is done in-universe and wiki-wise is to hide which is the actual SCP-001. They recognize that people will want to know, but it's important that they don't for whatever reason. This could be for a number of reasons: a pattern screamer, the risk of corruption, the SCP Foundation's own hand in creating these things, whatever. So they hide it in plain sight with a bunch of other fake decoys, fake articles entirely, and other genuine SCPs to make it impossible to tell exactly which thread to follow. Even if someone knows about the actual SCP-001, they can't tell that it's the actual SCP-001. Hidden in plain sight. And just in case anyone is curious as to my own opinion on SCP-001, I'll give you a quote that the SCP fans will understand. You want to know the best way to hide SCP-001? It's simple. You don't classify it as SCP-001. Fun fact, modern militaries also do this. The hiding in plain sight thing. It's basically impossible to hide anything nowadays with the internet and satellites. Any movements or build-up are very likely to be spotted. So in modern conflicts like the Russia-Ukraine war, Slava Ukraini by the way, what they tend to do is the build-ups, but all over the place, and in such a way as to make it impossible to tell what the real target is, to misdirect. The enemy knows an attack is coming, but they don't know where. So the element of surprise can still be maintained even when it's not really a surprise. That is what I think is happening here. I think that there's a bunch of threads which are being laid out, some of which are genuine, some of which aren't, some of which will be followed up on, and some of which won't, and it's all being done to obfuscate the actual thread of what's going on and making it near impossible to establish a clear picture that isn't contradicted by anything else. This is different to Chapter 4, which was mostly giving us a lot of relatively concrete information to work with. Chapter 5 is leaving open a lot of possibilities. One of them is true, I'm sure, but they've done a fantastic job at hiding which one it is.
I suppose I should also address this theory. It is possible that whoever the mole is isn't aware that they're doing any of this. It's possible that they've been dominated and given subtle objectives to carry out actions. That could be what's happening with Grimal's Cognis Mentis innate thing, but I can't prove that right now. No one can. There's no real evidence for it, which is why I'm not focusing on it. Chapter 4 was the mystery chapter. Chapter 5 was the main payoff to that mystery. From here on out, the story could just throw a total curveball twist at all of us that none of us could have seen coming, and that the rest of the stuff is just red herrings. Very good and well written red herrings that still characterize everyone and give us information about them and world build in such a way as to not make them waste of time, but still, nonetheless, red herrings to the actual point at hand. That's entirely a possibility, and it would be fair enough. We got our murder mystery solved, so now they can throw in whatever twists to demonstrate the power of the region. What I've done here is more looking at what information there is, and try to make theories out of that. But if it turns out that the mole is dominated and isn't aware of it, then there's not really a way for anyone to tell if that's what the case is. My point being that I'm focusing on what we can focus on, and limiting speculation. That's why I'm not going into theories like, is the fly the ghoul? Because yeah, that's possible, but how the hell can I make an argument in favour or against it? And that's also the reason why I'm not focusing on the idea that the ghoul was dominated. Occam's solar sorcery is really the only evidence we've got that could be used to argue in favour of mind control, but it could just as easily have also been a fully conscious person doing it. That's not enough to go on with anything, so I'm just not really doing anything with it. I'm focusing on what we can focus on, not what hypothetical vibes there are. I've also seen it suggested that Grimal planted the hunter data on Matilda. This makes little sense to me because, I don't know, personally, if I was in a game of Find the Horrible Monster, and I was a horrible monster, but I didn't want anyone to know I was a horrible monster, and someone planted the evidence on me that would convince everyone else that I am a horrible monster, but I didn't even steal the thing that would convince everyone that I was a horrible monster in the first place, I would at least try to deny it. But that too creates inconsistencies, which is going to lead us into Theory 3. Okay, so taking Theory 1 and 2 into account, I want to try and put together all of this and answer one question in particular. What is the ghoul actually after? I think theorizing on this might help us answer who the ghoul is. But here's the thing, I'm not entirely convinced that the ghoul is even trying to take anything. I've gone back and looked, and we never, at any point, specifically heard Kevin or Dee say that Kevin said that the ghoul was after the hunter data. Kevin mentioned the hunter data to Dee, and that there were many orgs like the Arcanum, where ghouls had managed to infiltrate their ranks, but that's it. And I'm starting to wonder if the idea that the ghoul was after the hunter data isn't just some massive assumption on Dee's part. Stick with me on this for a moment. Kevin learned about the infiltrators when he was in the Camarilla. He learned the hunter data was completed when he was with the Sabbat. The Regent, whom's ghoul they're hunting, is in the Camarilla. Now I can see the Sabbat wanting to wipe out the hunters without any regard, no questions, but the Camarilla? I don't think so, at least not that openly. I've seen some speculate that Grimal was mind-controlled by Matilda and that's why she didn't remember meeting her in the security room and why she lit Matilda's cigarette. Issue is, I've looked, and I cannot find any werewolf abilities that involve mind control. In fact, most of them involve resisting mind control, so I don't think it's that. Matilda was the one after the hunter data, not the ghoul. And assuming that the werewolves and vampires are working together for a moment, why send both a werewolf and a ghoul to infiltrate in the exact same way? It seems rather arbitrary. To spy on one another and make sure they don't backstab and run off, yeah, for all the good that did. Can't speculate on motivation. I feel like I'm saying that a lot this video. But let's stack the odds against ourselves for a moment. Let's assume that Kevin was wrong, or at least he was fed bad information by the Camarilla and the Sabbat, and the ghoul he warned Dee about was actually a werewolf the entire time. I still think there's a ghoul in there. My logic mostly being Occam's attack. Matilda would have ripped him in half. Why wouldn't she? He's still the biggest threat to her presence there. We have to assume that vampires are still involved in the situation to some degree. And it seems likely that Grimal, at the very least, is the one who attacked him, whether that be of her own volition or through being dominated. She got exceedingly defensive about the burn on her wrist, and frankly a lighter screwing up so badly it engulfs the entirety of your wrist, particularly the underside of it, seems unlikely. She would have to literally have her arm outreached forward, tuck it inwards, and then the light would have to shoot fireballs backwards to do that. The only reasonable guess that we have at this time is that it was Occam's solar sorcery. Now to be clear, I haven't actually been able to find anything about solar sorcery. As far as I can tell, it's not a thing in World of Darkness explicitly. Like there's 100% rituals that would do stuff like this in World of Darkness. There are demon-infested cheeseburgers, moon-hopping magic wars, random telekinetics, multiple hollow earths, the Umbra, just in general, and believe you me, we're getting into that one today. And a parody of World of Darkness inside World of Darkness, called World of Shadows, which had a particularly popular game that parodied Demon the Fallen, Fiend the Pacting, and the reason that it got so popular, or at least in part did, was morbid curiosity sparked by the contents after the developer was arrested for, and I swear this is a direct quote, unlawful sexual congress with an underage goat. If we can accept that, frankly if we can accept one of those things, we can accept that solar sorcery probably exists in World of Darkness even if it hasn't been specifically named. Besides that, it's likely a reference to Exalted, which was this whole other game that was meant to be linked to World of Darkness, but ended up just being its own thing. And also Hamon from JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. My point being that we have to infer what it does. Occam says that he ran out of stored sunlight, and Remel said that Grimal's wrist was burned like a sunburn. So my guess is that Occam stores up sunlight and can then utilize it as a weapon in a few different ways. I don't know if that explains how he can teleport, but it seems that he can emit sunlight, which is an extremely powerful weapon to be able to use against a vampire. So we have someone who seems to have the power to emit sunlight being attacked, who also grabbed the wrists of his attackers and left a burn on them, which Grimal has. Someone who is strong enough to both resist that and choke him out, which Grimal has demonstrated the ability to do, who was able to get into the archives, which Grimal was due to the vents, in the time frame needed to do so, which is where Grimal was. Barest minimum I can assume here is that Grimal attacked Occam. But why? Or rather, what logic led the ghoul to want Occam knocked out? Well, the most likely answer is panic. Occam would have uncovered the identity of the ghoul, thus exposing them, so knock him out, ruin the ritual, and duck and hide. And I'm assuming that Matilda got into the archives anyway. There are her claw marks all over the chapter house, probably from her exploring and trying to find her way around. So I'm assuming that she's found her way in there before. So now we come back to that question. If the ghoul wasn't after the hunter data, and the only reason they attacked Occam was out of sheer panic, then what the heck are they even there for? Honestly, my guess is nothing in particular. Vampires like to have ghouls and agents in all facets of human society, not even because they want something in particular, but just to keep their pulse on the place, so if anything major happens, they can get reports on what's happening. I think the ghoul is there just to be the Regent's eyes and ears in the Arcanum. Vampires don't like being discovered, and the Arcanum is one of the orgs specifically that has been trying to investigate them. If I'm correct and Grimal is the ghoul, then I think that may explain why she allowed this to go on. Or something or other. I don't know, I'm just pondering at the moment. Again, we don't have enough information on motivations, and I don't think that speculating on motivations is a particularly productive idea, so that's my thought at the moment. If you were to ask me to guess, I would guess that Grimal is the ghoul. She is clearly lying about something. There are inconsistencies with her testimony and lapses in logic in her actions. The others noticing the burn on her wrist freaked her out, and she panicked over Elise being accused. I would guess that she's the ghoul, but she became one or did this on the understanding that she would not bring direct harm to anyone in the chapter house. Like, willing or not, she doesn't want to harm the chapter house. I think that much more so than anything we can say without any doubt. Again though, like I said, it's a guess. That's what I have right now. If you're wondering why I don't think it's Elise, by the way, honestly part of that is because of Remald. If you watch the arc, literally every time he comes to any conclusion that isn't given to him by someone else, he's been objectively incorrect and disproven in minutes. He thought Dee was the infiltrator based on nothing but spite. He accused Giles right away despite it being impossible for him to get out of the room he was trapped in. He straight up tortured Grimal and forgot about it as he accused her of all her crimes. His main goal was finding out who killed Fatigue, and he accused literally everyone except the person who had actually done it. If we're going by that track record, we could almost use him as a wrongness Geiger counter. If he accuses someone directly, they're innocent. The only reason I'm still on Grimal with that logic is because Marcus and Brock were the ones to uncover evidence that Grimal may have been involved, not Remald. Look, I'll be the first to admit that if the werewolf and the ghoul are working together, that would explain a lot of the inconsistencies that we have in the moment. It's probably why so many people think that it's an option, but based on what evidence we have as of Chapter 5 and only Chapter 5, I struggle to see it. Small update. I just found this picture which points out that Grimal had her hands behind her back when she swiped Giles' smokes from Matilda, which suggests that she planted them there. Which may explain why Matilda was being so casual about having the cigarettes where they were if she were hiding the hunter data within them. But then the question is this: if Matilda wasn't after the hunter data and just stole it because the opportunity presented itself, then why was she in the chapter house in the first place? To assassinate Fatigue? Well, she was there back when Kitten and the group was there. She even mentioned that when she asked why they were even back. Why did it take her this long? And, like, even ignoring that, she did that. Mission accomplished. Why stick around? She could break out at any time, and then did. Did you see what I mean when I say that assessing motivation is impossible? I think we're reaching a point where we're in too deep, and going any further is starting to muddy the waters and become counterproductive. So let's move on to another theory.
Okay, I need to talk about this theory specifically because I genuinely think its existence is driving me insane and I must scream into the void about it. There are some people out there who have made the argument that Occam is the ghoul. Is there any validity to this? No. No, there isn't. He isn't the ghoul. Stop it. First of all, his solar sorcery is powered by the light of the sun. You know, the thing the vampires die to? There is no prayer in heaven, hell, nor earth that a vampire, especially one like the Regent, would let their ghouls just have that kind of power. But let's assume for a moment that they did. Please use the fleshy meat in the middle of your head. What's his frame of logic here exactly? I'm the ghoul, but I don't want people to know I'm the ghoul. Dee has come back and is saying there's a ghoul, so I'm going to lock myself in the vault, assault myself, and this will convince people that there is 100% a ghoul among us. This will make people think that there isn't a ghoul. What? Am I having an aneurysm? What do you mean this is a theory? This is like a child who isn't being bullied and is trying to convince their worried parents that they aren't being bullied. So they slam their own face against the fucking wall until their nose breaks, and then, covered in blood, they go up to their parents and say, hey, guess what? I'm being bullied, and think that this is somehow going to stop their parents being worried they're being bullied. What? If he was a ghoul, why wouldn't he just say, nah, you're banished, piss off to Dee? Who would have stopped him? Why assault himself? What fucking roller coaster of logic is there to that? But what if Matilda assaulted him? Then why didn't she kill him? His ritual would have revealed that she wasn't human. Occam wouldn't assault himself. And the fact that he's even alive proves that the ghoul attacked him. So he can't be the ghoul. I don't understand. How did this hide him better? If he became a ghoul to protect the chapter house as the theory suggests, how does making everyone think that there's a ghoul there make them safer? It guarantees someone dies. I don't understand how this became a theory. A very small theory here, but let's go for it. In Big D's reluctant guide to vampiric powers, one of the disciplines brought up was Obfuscate, which basically screws with your perception. Say you see a vampire in a corner of a photo or a security camera. Obfuscate would screw with your perception of the photo so that you couldn't see it anymore. The theory I'm suggesting is simply that the footage hasn't been tampered with in a physical sense, but it's one of the disciplines that the ghoul has. The footage is fine, it's just the perception of Brock and Marcus that's screwed up. How likely is this? No idea. Hopefully other folks can put something together with that. If Grimal is the ghoul and she's doing this, then maybe that's why there's still footage of her available? Maybe she's not that good with it yet? Or distance is a factor or something? Not too sure, but it's a thought that I had and I figured I'd throw it out there. But again, we have nothing to work with here. We don't know what happened inside the security room. Everyone who went inside is lying in one way or another. And we don't even have a timeline for how long everyone was in there. We are speculating, but we have zero actual evidence. So a lot of people have been wanting an explanation of the Umbral realm, to which my response is, oh really, is that all you want? The realm of souls, also called the Umbra, is a monumentally complicated thing to describe. If you've ever gone on the White Wolf wiki and gone, what the hell are they even talking about anymore? I was just trying to learn about vampires, when and where the hell am I? And how did I end up on a page about the planet Mars? Sorry, what the hell do you mean Mars used to be inhabited? You can't just skim past that. Odds are good you ran into something connected to the Umbra, and a lot of stuff is connected to the Umbra. It is easily the most difficult thing in World of Darkness to explain and wrap your head around, but I will try to explain it as simply as I can. The Umbra is essentially a mirror of the world that exists alongside but also separate to it. It is separated from Earth by something called the Gauntlet, a sort of metaphysical spiritual door that doesn't physically exist but also does at the same time. Let's build up this analogy. Imagine you're in a room in, random city example, London, with only one door, and you have two keys. One key will take you out of the room and into London like a normal door. The second key is made out of magic, and when you open the door with that, the door will take you to another dimension. The door in this analogy is the Gauntlet. It's just a magic door essentially with a silly name that you have to have a particular key in order to activate. Except it's not exactly a door, it's more like a door-wall hybrid that engulfs the entire planet. That's the simplest way of understanding how the Gauntlet works. And on the other side of this door, you have the Umbra, a spiritual world which is far larger than the Earth is. The Gauntlet is that wall, a metaphysical separation that divides the two. In some places you can walk from the Earth to the Umbra without further requirements, but in others you would need a sort of magical key, a right or an ability that would allow you to traverse between the two. This is what the werewolf did to shift between our world and the Umbra. Werewolves have an ability called stepping sideways, which allows them to traverse the Umbra via any reflective surface, like a mirror or a puddle of rainwater. It comes to them as naturally as walking does to someone who can walk. The Umbra itself is split into 3 different, Umbrae sections, like isolated areas for lack of a better word. The High Umbra, or the Astral Reaches, the Middle Umbra, or the Spirit Wilds, and the Low Umbra, or the Underworld. All of them make up a group called the Near Umbra, which is focused around Earth. They all have their own gauntlets between them. This picture isn't exactly super helpful. Think of it more as the Underworld being in the center of the Earth, and the Astral Reaches as being part of the atmosphere, and the Middle Umbra being the surface of the Earth. It doesn't work exactly like that, there are still parts which operate differently, but right now we're just trying to make sense of it all. If this is confusing, it's because it's hard to describe. In fact, I'll be entirely blunt about it. It wasn't until I saw Chapter 5 that it really clicked for me precisely what the gauntlet was. I had a rough understanding of it, but it was a very confused one, and then I saw the episode and my brain just went, ah, that's how it works. So don't worry about it if you're struggling with understanding. I was struggling with understanding until like 2 weeks ago. Trying to explain the geography of the Umbra is a bit like trying to describe fascism. If you know what you're talking about, you could do it relatively decently, but it would be fundamentally incoherent because the subject matter is inherently incoherent and doesn't make any sense and changes depending on where you are and what's going on. That's a comparison that's going to upset some people, but A, I'm right, and B, the point I'm making is that the Umbra is very idiosyncratic complex and in some places literally changes how it appears depending on the individual there, and also changes visually for each individual when there are multiple individuals there. So Prick A is seeing something entirely different to Prick B despite being in the same place at the same time. And that's only parts of the Umbra. On top of that, there are many worlds called realms in World of Darkness, and most of them are at least somewhat connected to the Umbra. Also, some planets have their own Umbra and /or penumbra, which are then linked to Earth via what are called shade realms. To put this simply, if you met all the requirements, you could physically walk to Mars or Venus via the Umbra if you wanted to. You have the Near Umbra, the Far Umbra, which is any of the planets up to the asteroid belt, and then the Deep Umbra, beyond the asteroid belt, where weird alien crap is happening. A group called the Technocracy found the Dyson Sphere in Alpha Centauri, the next star system over. Again, found it. Not built it, found it. There's some weird shit happening in deep space. If you go up into the sky of the Umbra, you enter the astral realms, which is where thought and concepts exist but in different layers. Kind of like how the atmosphere has different layers to it. And if you dig down, you end up in Malpheus, which is just the torment dimension. And there are sinkholes that opened up due to the German atrocities in the Second World War because psychic shockwaves wrecked the Umbra. Yep, that's a thing that can happen. There are parts of the Umbra where you have to physically go to enter a connected realm, others require magic and can be accessed anywhere, some require rituals, others don't. Some can be accessed from Earth directly, bypassing the Umbra entirely. Some are parts of the Umbra itself, separated from one another like islands are on an ocean, and different groups all define it in different ways. You can also just make new realms, mages do it all the time. They've set up bases and the likes in them. They're usually called Horizon Realms, because they're metaphysically located in a part of the Umbra called the Horizon. I mean, hell is in the Umbra, as in like the abyss where all the demons come from, where the fallen angels are. The ones that went to war against God. The Abrahamic hell is located within the Umbra. It was sealed away for a while until 1999, and then we got all the game lines for Demon the Fallen. It's located in the underworld where the wraiths/ghosts hang out, which is in the Low Umbra, or maybe part of the Penumbra, which overlaps and mirrors the physical world on a spiritual level but also overlaps with the Umbra. Or maybe it isn't. No one is entirely sure. I've looked, and it's canon that no one is entirely sure how and where to define it. A lot of the categorization with the Umbra comes from different groups defining it differently. None of this is objective. It's how different groups make sense of something that inherently doesn't make any sense. Look, when it comes to the Umbra, you're just going to have to accept the fact that things are a lot more metaphysical, contextual, and weird stuff just happens. All the weird stuff in World of Darkness, 9 times out of 10, it's connected to the Umbra in some way. As such, the scope of this video means I can't give you anything more specific than an incredibly broad overview. The Umbra refers to a whole bunch of potential stuff, from near-Earth spiritual dealings to stuff happening on the fringes of Jupiter, to like 6 different known afterlives, to realms of mere concept, to merely being a gateway to the other realms. We haven't even talked about the inhabitants of the Umbra, which also vary wherever you go, but the main inhabitants are spirits. And everything has spirits in World of Darkness. There are nature spirits, like the spirits of animals, to the spirit of this rock, the spirit of that rock, the spirit of the concept of rocks, and the spirit of rock itself. There are spirits in some realms of humans inside helicopters hunting down wolves. All the planets have spirits, like Gaia, the Earth spirit, and Luna, the Moon spirit. The forces of nature all have spirits. The spirits of spirits have spirits. Electricity, fiberglass, microchips, and the concepts of capitalism and communism all have spirits. Like I said, stuff gets weird in there. Needless to say, if Marcus wanted to learn about the supernatural, he literally could not be in a more supernatural place. This is like being interested in Russian history and getting transported back in time to the Bolshevik Revolution. This is as authentic as you can get. Did that clear up anything for y'all? If it didn't, then bad news. This is probably the most coherent that it's going to get. It's very difficult to explain, and going into it in any more depth would take up literally hours. As to which part of the Umbra Marcus was taken to as seen here, I would have to guess the Middle Umbra. The Middle Umbra is sort of what you imagine when you think of it being the Earth's mirror. It's a vast realm that reflects the world in some ways and differs from it in others. Think of it like an ocean, and there are realms scattered among it, which would represent islands. There are parts where you make your own world, some you have to go to. It's kind of like a spiritual hub world, for lack of a better term. If Matilda wants to take him to another realm, they're likely going to have to travel via the Middle Umbra to get there. So, with Marcus being captured, one has to ask a question. How the hell are they going to get him back? How are they going to get into the Umbra? No one there really seems to have the capacity to enter the Umbra as far as we know. That might be why Occam is contacting the Coalition. Well, if you recall, I mentioned that just about every external realm is connected to the Umbra in some way or another. Anyone remember a place that we saw that doesn't seem to be part of Earth proper? Because I do. The 99p store. It's pretty clear that this place has some sort of supernatural connection. It's hard to say what exactly it is, but if it's another realm of some sort, or it connects to another world of some sort, then there's a good chance that it's connected to the Umbra. So my theory is that Dee will take the group to the 99p store, break into the back, head down this hole and enter the Umbra that way. There's some flaws in this plan, of course. Dee did say that it was more a mental thing, that he didn't actually go there physically. And depending on where they are in the Umbra, they may have to pass another gauntlet, which kind of seems like they're back at the original problem to begin with, unless they have someone with them who can pass through the gauntlet from the underworld to the Middle Umbra, if that's where they are, or any other number of gauntlets that they might need to pass through. But it is the one place that seems to have some sort of connection to the Umbra, so that's my theory. That they go there, figure out how to enter the Umbra, and figure it out from there. I'm not particularly attached to this theory if you can't already tell. It's just one that entered my head and it feels like it would make for some good foreshadowing, so maybe that's the plan? I don't know. Let's go on to the next one. So this I think that Marcus is digging around with. The Oculus Empyrean. Closest translation from Latin I've been able to find is the Eye of the Empyrean. In Christian cosmology, the Empyrean is the part of heaven God hangs out in. If you look at the eye, notice this cross with a number of dots, one in the center and one at the end points of each of the lines. This is the exact same symbol for the imbued. Humans who, in a moment of perfect clarity and understanding, were chosen by enigmatic beings called messengers to fight against the supernatural. Who are the messengers? No one has even the slightest clue. Absolutely none. They are some of the most mysterious creatures in all of World of Darkness. And that's including all of the weird, inexplicable crap that happens in the Umbra. We have more of an explanation for that than we have on the messengers. What's interesting about them is that if they imbue you, they're kind of fine with you just doing whatever afterwards. There are some people that think that the messengers are actually the bad guys here, since all the weird supernatural stuff started happening after the messengers got in touch with them. And the messengers don't unimbue them or anything, they just let people do whatever they feel the need to. Whatever the case may be, this object seems to be an imbued eye. And if there is any doubt left, we can eliminate those doubts with these symbols. The imbued have a sort of glyph-based language of words which they can see, and these symbols are what we're seeing here. Imbued are able to understand them, so it's implied that this is the language of the messengers and the imbued have an innate understanding of them. Whatever this thing is, it is 100% unambiguously related to the imbued and the messengers. There's no question there whatsoever. The symbols that Marcus is seeing, by the way, they're the glyphs for danger and puppet. Puppet is the part that makes me think that the ghoul is still a threat, in case you were wondering. So, we know that this thing is related to the messengers. There's not really any ambiguity there. In such a case, there's a couple of things that we can infer. Occam said that the only person the eye worked for in the past was Fatigue, but it stopped working for him a while ago. I would like to point out that Fatigue was described as being a hunter in his youth, fighting against all manner of creatures. But the eye stopped working for him a while ago, presumably around the time he decided to stop fighting. And it doesn't work for anyone else in the Arcanum, who are avowed not hunters, but scholars. And it worked right away with Marcus, who is an active hunter. So it seems that the eye only works for hunters, which would make sense given that the function of the messengers is to imbue people to fight the supernatural. The eye may well only work for hunters. So does this mean that Marcus has been imbued? I don't know. I don't think so. Seems more like he was just given a push in the right direction. If he has been imbued, he can't become a mage. The imbued can't perform magic or even sorcery from what I understand. So, if Marcus performs any more magic in the future, we can rest assured that he isn't imbued. I've seen some people say that this is a dumb move of Marcus, and I mean jumping in headfirst wasn't exactly his smartest move, but it's not like he's possessed or anything. To be clear, the imbued, again, have free will. They can do whatever they want. It's not like Marcus has been possessed or something. There are some that theorize that the messengers are angels, Elohim, direct creations of God in the religious sense. The name Oculus Empyrean seems to suggest that this is how HTP is interpreting them, or at the very least is leaning into the idea. If that's the case, then we have three options here, I think. 1. This is the eye of an imbued, but the eye still has some sort of ability. 2. It's the quote eye of an actual honest-to-God messenger. Or 3. This isn't a messenger at all, but a reliquary, an item that stores an angel, or, well, an Elohim, a fallen angel. A demon. If messengers are angels, then an angel and a demon aren't too functionally dissimilar, they're both Elohim. If they're both Elohim, then the symbols could just be their language. Just a bit of speculation, I don't know if it being a demon is all that likely. I only bring it up because demons are essentially the same as angels, so it's worth considering. The demons only even exist because they foresaw a disaster that would wipe out humanity and God just decided to not explain anything to them. They intervened because they genuinely loved humanity. So I think that it's likely one of those three. Right now we don't know which. But if it's either of the latter two, then oh boy, Marcus is dealing with some shit that's way beyond his understanding. My money is on option 1, just to be clear, but that's also based on literally no information other than it being an eye with an imbued symbol on it. Werewolves, the children and warriors of Gaia. To put werewolves and their line Werewolf the Apocalypse into proper context, to massively oversimplify them, they're deity-ordained eco-terrorists. They were made by the spirit of the earth, Gaia, to protect it. Let me summarize this as simply as possible, just so we're all working from the same level of understanding. The conflict for the werewolves is based around the Triad, a collection of three immensely powerful spirits that make up the laws of the universe. The Wild, which is basically nature incarnate, the Weaver, which represents the formation of patterns, civilization, and organization out of the chaos of the wild, and the Worm is entropy incarnate, which destroys in order to clear the way for new life, so that the cycle goes around and around. And to put it immensely simply, these three were once in balance, but they aren't anymore, and the Worm is basically eroding the fabric of reality. So the werewolves were created by Gaia to protect the wild and to restore the balance, or at least some degree of balance, back to the Triad. Werewolves are powerful. Absurdly so. Your average werewolf could probably rip your average vampire in half without breaking a sweat. Well, it's all relative, depends how well trained the werewolf is and what generation the vampire is and how well they're trained. I'll put it to you like this way. Matilda could probably slaughter Piotr and the rest of the vampires from the first arc, easily. The toughest fight that they would have to deal with would be Kevin, but this is way beyond what Kevin is, there's something tells me that this is far beyond what Kevin is accustomed to. So I put my money on Matilda. But speaking of power, here's the thing about Matilda, or whatever her name is. I'm making this before we learn Matilda's actual name, but it's in quotation marks in the credits, so we know that's not her actual name, so just bear with me, people from, 2 months in the future. Throughout this section of the chapter, she was holding back. There's no question in my mind. Look at what she is able to do, how fast she was able to move, how hard she was able to hit, and how easily she tore through Giles' hand. She could move and hit like that constantly. If she wanted these people dead, they would be dead. She was focused on recovering the hunter data, after she focused on getting out of the building, and then she focused on the people attacking her, and after that she had Marcus hostage. She was fighting with a handicap, but she was holding back. On top of that, the werewolves don't tend to send their warriors to do spy work. They don't infiltrate, they rip and tear. If they do infiltration, usually they send weaker members of their tribe to do it. So let me make this absolutely clear. Matilda is a terrifying force of nature, but she is likely a relatively weak werewolf compared to the warriors of her tribe. You think this was scary? It doesn't even come close to the full potential of a werewolf. This is nothing. Telling which tribe Matilda or whatever her name is belongs to is difficult. Bearing in mind again, I'm making this in the wake of chapter 5. There's no further anything that's come out yet, as of the time of this going up. Right now we have little to work with when it comes to identifying a tribe. Werewolf tribes aren't like vampire clans, where there are some which have pretty clear visual tells. It can be a lot trickier to tell the difference between a Bruja and a member of the Ministry, but if you see a Nosferatu vampire, you'll know it's a Nosferatu vampire. Werewolves don't have any physical distinctions between one another in the same way that would help differentiate between tribes. That's not how those social structures work. Some werewolves might feel a calling to a particular tribe on a spiritual level. Some choose their tribe, or the tribe chooses them. Some don't join a tribe at all, but they all look very similar to one another in their Krynos form, their war form. Unless it's a Black Spiral Dancer, which Matilda is not. Trust me, if she was a Black Spiral Dancer, we would know, I can promise you that. Her just being immensely angry also isn't evidence of anything. Most werewolves are angry, all the time. There's a mechanic for it in the rulebooks, the rage, so that's not even something that we can use to identify her. That being said, based on what we've seen, we could make a few guesses. It's 3 options, I think. My guess is that she's either a Glasswalker, a Bone Gnawer, or part of the Get of Fenris. Based on what we have, it really could be any of them. Starting with the Bone Gnawers. The Bone Gnawers are something of a rarity in the World of Darkness because they are in fact based as all hell. So during the days of the Empyrean, which was when werewolves ruled over humanity with an iron fist and the terror that they inflicted in humanity was so great that that's where the delirium came from, the Bone Gnawers were one of the only tribes that saw the werewolves oppressing humanity and went, what? No, absolutely none of this, and actually fought on the side of humanity against many of the other tribes. They tend to find themselves in the lower rungs of society, the outcasts and pariahs. Not out of necessity either, but out of choice. These guys helped humanity during the Black Death, even when the Inquisition burned them for being, quote, witches. They fought to end slavery. They were involved in the American and French revolutions. These are the types of people that the Bone Gnawers are. There's no real way of getting around it. They're basically socialists. They side with the masses against their oppressors because they see that it is not the rank and file human that is causing the death of the earth, no matter how many werewolf tribes or even well-intentioned humans might try to say it is. It's the elite, the CEOs, the politicians and their lackeys and the business owners and the corporate interests that have bought them, and they are willing to fight alongside any human willing to pick up Gaia's cause. Bone Gnawers can be found in civilization and tend to operate in the lower classes, and are good at going in unseen, which fits Matilda quite well. That could be why she chose to infiltrate as a maid. It would fit with the Bone Gnawers' general motif. Another option is the Glasswalkers. The Bone Gnawers are somewhat split between the city and more rural areas. The Glasswalkers are not. They are deeply embedded in civilization and technology, viewing them as not being all too different from nature on a fundamental level. This puts them in conflict with other Garou who think they're more in line with the Weaver as opposed to the Wild, and there may be some truth to that, but they are still fundamentally fighting for Gaia. You might be wondering how this is related to Matilda. On the surface it isn't really. Werewolves talk a big game about being purely natural, but a number of tribes do incorporate technology. In the modern day they don't really have a choice. So much intel and infrastructure is stored digitally that it becomes a necessity to really fight against the influences of the worm at all. So you need some technology. So we can't even use the fact that she was going after electronically stored hunter data as something that we can go off of. What we can go off of are these things. These are likely totems or patron spirits. These are a bit tricky, but basically there are some spirits that make pact with particular tribes of Garou or individual Garou, and lend them support and certain powers, provided that the tribe follows certain requirements that align with that spirit's desires. The patron spirit of the Glasswalkers is Spider. And if we take a look at Matilda's shoulder here, when the voice telling her to leave the hunters alive starts, we see a spider come from her fur. That's about all I've got for this evidence, I'll level with you. I honestly couldn't tell you which tribe she's from based on this alone. Her moth power here is likely a gift, the gift of termites, which lets them erode wood and paper rapidly. That's a rank 3 bone gnawer gift, so that might mean something. The razor claws might be from the bear totem, but that doesn't necessarily indicate tribe, just totem. Honestly, I'm not as deep with werewolf as I am with other stuff like mage, so hopefully someone with more general knowledge can make a better assessment of that, but that's all I can offer. Matilda did mention doing this, quote, Stig's way from the start. Stig is a character who exists in the extended World of Darkness lore. Stig half Bonebreaker. He's part of the Get of Fenris tribe, who are violent lunatics, which might explain Matilda's glee during the fight, but that's all I've got there. I'd also like to point out though that one of the other options is that Matilda isn't even a member of a tribe, but a rogue pack of some description. Also remember that there are other shapeshifters out there. Were-spiders are a thing, and unlike werewolves, were-spiders can be made up of thousands of tiny spiders, rather than just one big transformation, but they can also be just one, because of course it can't be simple. Anyway, it's possible that this werewolf is part of a generalized shapeshifter pack and that spider is acting as her communications piece. I base this more or less entirely on the spider being there, which would make Matilda quite the rarity amongst the Garou, it must be said. These are all very mutually exclusive tribes and concepts though, I have to be honest. A Get of Fenris working with other shapeshifters is very unlikely, to put it mildly. I lean towards her being part of the Bone Gnawers because of the termite gift, but honestly, if I'm wrong on that one, I don't mind that much because it's hard to tell with what little we've got. Her personality would fit in well with the Get of Fenris, and she being the werewolf, Cold being in a room of humans, being in a room full of monsters, so... You know what, actually, flip a coin. If it lands on heads, I go with Bone Gnawers. If it lands on tail, I go with Get of Fenris. But yeah, that's all I've got on Matilda. But on the subject of werewolves, the voice that Matilda was speaking to said to bring back Marcus because he might have information on Shuck. Some people have hypothesized that this means Black Shuck.
Now to be clear, I'm not here to speculate on Black Shuck, like showing up, because I don't really care all that much if he does or not. I'm not here to dissect, ooh, does Marcus's weird the sickness of dogs long past will haunt you? Does that mean that Black Shuck is showing up? That's not the kind of theory that I'm interested in talking about. I'm kind of just happy to let that particular plot point play out or not play out. It as always depends on how it's handled. There's another theory that was requested of me to talk about, so here I am, talking about it.
Since this isn't my theory, I'll be citing some information from a few Reddit posts and a YouTube comments I got. Let me just tidy this up a little bit. There we go. So the gist of the theory is this. Boy is Black Shuck reincarnated. Black Shuck is a werewolf that occasionally reincarnates when two of his descendants have a child. Alright then.
I suppose I should clarify. Black Shuck doesn't really reincarnate, as in his spirit re-enters the mortal world. It's more like his descendants look like the original Black Shuck, so they like take the mantle, as it were.
So, Black Shuck is from the Silent Strider tribe, and these guys are often followed by wraiths on their adventures. They're also a very nomadic tribe. So the theory goes that Horse is possessed by a wraith which is following Boy, because Boy is Shuck reincarnated. Shuck is seen as an oracle of the apocalypse by many Garou. This of course requires that Dor is a kinfolk. That Dee had a child with either a werewolf or a kinfolk at some point down the line, entirely possible, and that Dor also did. Also plausible. Boy is Dor's biological son after all, we learned it in our last video, and that person that Dor slept with was also a descendant of Black Shuck. It also proposes that mastering Luna is in reference to Boy. It also implies that Dor's mother was also a descendant of Black Shuck. This theory would also be used to explain why Dor and Bor aren't in this arc right now, because Matilda may have been able to recognize him and then focus on him, and then there's not much of a story. It's not impossible, I suppose. Statistically unlikely, but it's possible. I'm not sure if I buy it myself. It seems a little too convenient, and the mastering Luna was part of a longer screed and not an individual point on its own. Plus, Boy's like 11. Most human-based werewolves don't undergo their first change until they're undergoing puberty. Most not until their teen years. Boy undergoing a first change at this stage would be noticeable, and you could argue that it's due to him being exceptional, as has been mentioned many times by the cast, but I don't know. Something about it just feels off to me. I'm afraid I don't really have a ton to say about it. This is just one of those theories I don't feel all that much about. Plus, I'm not sure how much I like the idea in all honesty. I'm still partial to my own theory that boy is an oracle in the mage sense of the word. Up next though, a theory I do feel something about, and our final theory for today.
Anyone figured out if mummies are real yet?
I swear to God, if this turns out to be foreshadowing, I'm gonna lose my goddamn mind. You all know what a mummy is. It's a preserved dead person. In World of Darkness though, mummies can also be called the Reborn, and they are immortal. And they are immortal by being alive, but better. Mummies are basically human beings. Their bodies are human, they started out life as a completely regular human, they are human. However, they have been given immortality via a spell known as the Spell of Life. Though the body may die or wither away or suffer from any number of issues, to put this immensely simply, their spirit is able to go to the underworld, absorb life energy and return to their body, rejuvenate and heal it, and they just live again. In this state they experience life in a far more enhanced way. They see the intricacies of colours and art, hear the many sounds others overlook, taste more intensely, they live more but better. And these things are hard to kill. However badly destroyed, spread apart, disintegrated, atomically butchered or magic blasted they are, they can regenerate. So long as the spirit is fine, they're fine. We actually have a canon answer for how much you need in terms of raw power to kill a mummy outright. Are you ready for this one? It's ground zero of a nuclear bomb. You have to Hiroshima them. That's how much power you need to knock these things out. Or have magic or sorcery equivalent of firepower, but anyway, not important. There's a bunch of different mummies across the world. You have the Egyptian mummies, which are the recipients of the most advanced spell of life in the world, and are what the main game line focuses on. But you also have mummies from South America, China, and Mexico. Of course, those are just the ones focused on. Lots of cultures practice mummification, from Maori tribes to the so-called communist USSR. It's entirely possible that many of these cultures have their own versions of the spell of life. Reborn are rare, like rarest of the rare in World of Darkness. Frankly speaking, the demons locked up in literal hell only broke out in 1999, and absolutely nowhere near all of them got out of that. But there are probably more demons in the world than there are reborn. We're talking like triple digits at the most charitable. Maybe in the low 4 digits at the absolute height of their power. And after millennia, they are far from being at the height of their power. So I don't know when exactly this idea popped into my head or how, but as I researched it, I found that I wasn't the only person who had had this thought. So here it is. It is possible that D is a reborn, that he's a mummy. Don't you mean it, Daddy? I will put a fucking bullet in you, random commenter. Do not test me! You may recall in my previous video, I said I disliked the idea of D being some supernatural entity. That I liked the idea of the family just being mostly average people fighting against the supernatural, and that's what appealed to me in the first place. So people actually took issue with that, saying that that wasn't exactly what was advertised and that it was my own presuppositions that were at fault. To which my response is, they literally named the damn series after Hunt of the Reckoning, the one specific line in the entire World of Darkness line which was specifically about regular people that have nothing special going on. It had the imbued, but then they released new editions of the game to remove that from being the central focus, specifically to make the game more focused on regular humans. Forgive me for making a couple of assumptions. Anyway, bitterness aside, as far as these possible origins or supernatural nature go, I have to be honest with you, I think him being a reborn would be the option I disliked the least, by far, because fundamentally, mummies are just regular people. They're just really damn old and really damn rare. They're not supernatural in the same way vampires or werewolves or imbued are. They don't get a whole slew of abilities due to being mummies. Mummies are just people. They've just had a really, really long time to get good at a lot of things. Like fighting, or learning sorcery, or understanding the supernatural, or going on absurd hunts. This would honestly fit with the requirements that I outlined in my original video, that I would be fine with D just being a random person who through some quirk of circumstance became immortal in the sense that he is ageless. It does clash with the idea that he could be killed with someone who got a good hit on him, but I think that if we take his family into account, and how much he cares about them, and how much that impacts him being knocked out of commission for a while, and being unable to protect them and possibly lose them to the night folk would be an immense blow to him, to the extent that he would actively seek to avoid harm to himself so that he could be there to protect them. And that would make sense and be an interesting way of doing things. That description even fits with a certain type of reborn, the Tomb Keepers. So I might be willing to overlook that, maybe. It's not perfect by any stretch. I would still prefer if he was a character who could in theory be permanently knocked out by a blow from a supernatural creature. But him being a reborn avoids the many other problems that I have with theories like him being the child of Adam and Eve, or him being a ghoul or some other supernatural phenomenon. It fits with my desire for him to just be some random dude who happened upon immortality. He demonstrated the traits and characteristics that were seen as worthy for being a reborn, and so he earned it. And there are mummies that can't resurrect. They failed the judgment of Ma'at. It's a whole thing, don't worry about it. But they can't resurrect, so when they die, that's it. Maybe Dee's one of those, who knows? Hell, him being a reborn would actually make a lot of his insane ramblings make sense.
The reborn experience life more intensely. Dee has a zest for life. Dee uses ancient measurements like Minas because he saw them being used all the time when he was there. Both he and Marcus got the crap beaten out of them by Piotr, but Dee's healed up already while Marcus hasn't. He knows so much about the supernatural because he's lived long enough to encounter it so many times. He looks younger compared to his kids because he can revitalize himself. He may know little about demons because the demons were locked away until 1999, just 7 years before the start of the series, and that's why he mocks Ramon for being an apparent creationist, despite him being correct but also not correct. Both the Big Bang and the creationism myth are correct in World of Darkness and happened literally at the exact same time on different layers of reality. Just don't worry about it. Hell, we could take this a step further. You remember all those times where Dee has said, oh yeah, no, I'd have been fine, I'm just built different. If we look at previous episodes where these insane ramblings are played off as jokes, until they're proven to be 100% correct, let's assume for just a moment that his I'm built different comments aren't him just being insane. Him being a reborn would make those lines not only deeply funny and quirky, but also 100% true, which would be consistent with his characterization throughout Arc 1. Everyone else in the family gets slaughtered, but he'll be fine. He just needs to chill in the afterlife for a bit and he'll be back. Physically, anyway. Emotionally, maybe not so much. Hell, the reborn can have kids. And sometimes, those kids can demonstrate an aptitude for sorcery. Gee, doesn't that sound familiar? I wonder if Dee has any children that have demonstrated such an aptitude that has been demonstrated in an audio log. Of course, a lot of that assumes that he's an ancient mummy. It's also very possible that he's an Amenti, which... Okay, so basically in 1999 there was a storm in the underworld that destroyed the spiritual bodies of a lot of mummies. So, a new spell of life was created, wherein the spirits of the reborn would fuse with the recently deceased to create a new type of reborn called an Amenti. This is often called the third life, the first being that of the original mummy, the second being that of the human that just died, and the third being the fusion of the two. Since the series takes place in 2006, if that's the case, then Dee would have only been a mummy for 7 years, which a lot of the dialogue suggests and heavily implies otherwise. Hell, my sorcery comment about Marcus would be entirely coincidental if that were the case. Dee had Marcus more than 30 years ago on account of Marcus being at least 30 years old, and forgive me for flaunting my education, but 7 is in fact a smaller number than 30 when we're talking about years at the very least before any of you mathematician pedants show up. I hate you and your bastard numbers, may you all burn in hell. Just thought I'd mention the possibility, even though I think Dee being an Amenti is far less likely if this theory is correct. You know, it'd be very funny if it turned out that Dee was Horus. No, not that one. Like Horus from mythology. He exists in World of Darkness, and now he's an Amenti mummy. And I feel like that would be a very funny way to screw with the TTS fans. Ooh, who's the Horus Lupercal allegory going to be? Ooh, it's Dee actually, fuck you! I mean, that's almost certainly not what happened, but it would be funny. Being a reborn also fits with Dee's personality too. Mummies are the closest thing to an unambiguous good versus evil fight. Of course, it's not that simple, but the overall narrative is that they fight to bring balance back into the world. And in the World of Darkness, and in, let's be real, reality itself, things are pretty dark right now. The world needs people who are going to go full on in, hell hath no fury, like a good person going to war types, who are willing to fight for as long as it takes to see the world get better. And Dee constantly keeps putting hunting before anything else, and trying to redeem those whom he thinks can be brought over towards being good again, almost like he's trying to restore balance. I think Burger Creek put it best in his video. Mummy the Resurrection is the game line in World of Darkness about going to therapy. And hey, look at the role he's been playing for Kevin!
Do you see the kind of shit that this theory stuff does to my brain yet? Yeah, here's a bunch of very compelling stuff that would hint towards this being real, but it's also very possibly pure coincidence. Lots of folks are just naturally gifted at sorcery or are just born with telekinetics because, again, nothing is ever fucking simple with these people. Okay, Papanang, why are you like this? Is this how you get your sick kicks? Is this being done to torment me specifically? Because it feels like this is being done to torment me specifically. I know that they all watched my original theory video, so I like to imagine that they all just got in a Discord call afterwards and just went, shit, they're onto us. It's very funny to imagine it to me, and then they responded by making my job as infuriating as possible. Well played, bastards. Man, what I wouldn't have given to be able to see their reactions when they realized that I'd hit the nail on the head on a bunch of stuff. Honestly, the more I let this reborn idea sit with me, the more I think I like it. It fits with the requirements that I had for D. It's also a pretty good way of incorporating mummies into the series because the odds of encountering one otherwise by chance is slim to none. I think I'd be okay with it if this ended up being the case. And with that, I think we're about done. I am more tired than you could possibly imagine. It's 4 AM. I have a crap ton of other projects to work on and I've got work to do, so I won't draw this intro out for too long. Discuss all the options and theories here. The last video, it was a joy to see so many people talking about World of Darkness. People really got into it. It was great. Hopefully we can see more of it in this one. But I need to go to sleep, so give me money on Patreon. Like, comment and subscribe as patronage to your new reality-bending god. Me! Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you next time.